Welcome to the Grove Podcast, where we feature Evergreen members and their real-life stories of salvation, transformation, struggle, and hope. I'm Joy Gabbert, and before we get started today, I would like to just make a little bit of an announcement. Today's episode is going to be episode 10 and our season ender. We probably will be taking the rest of August and maybe even all of September off and releasing starting in October. So mark that down as season 2 to tune in when we come back. Okay, so today we have Mike Seagraves. Welcome to the Grove.
Hello.
So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, who you're married to, how many kids you guys have.
I'm married to Rosie Seagraves. She teaches fourth grade for another month or so, and then she's going to be joining my Sunday school class where I teach an adult Sunday school class. We have 4 children. Megan, who's 40 now. Michael Justice, who's, I believe he's 38. I'm bad with ages. And then Caitlin and Jonathan.
Okay, awesome. So you mentioned where you guys serve. Your wife serves with the children's ministry, and you are leading a Sunday school class. But how long have you guys actually been members of Evergreen?
We joined Evergreen August 4th of 2002.
Okay.
Back then, we were at Thoreau Academy.
Yeah.
And that's actually where I got saved.
Yeah.
And was Evergreen 101.
Yeah, we'll get into that story in a minute. So you guys have been here for a while.
Yeah.
Why don't we then start all the way back with your childhood? What was your childhood like?
Yeah, it was kind of rough. You know, I was born in California, lived in Southern California, born in Santa Monica, lived in Culver City. When I was probably 12 or so, my dad moved us to Missouri, to the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. We had a small family farm on 40 acres, milked cows, had pigs, chickens, and all that. And that's really where I grew up, was in Missouri. Yeah.
Was it a Christian home?
My mom, yes. My dad, no. My dad was very anti-God, anti-church, very much persecuted my mom for her faith. Mm. My mom made sure we grew up in church. I grew up in a small Southern Baptist church, even in California. I remember when my mom was baptized, and I remember the name of that church, Bible Baptist Church, I think in Venice, California, Venice or Santa Monica. She got baptized. Mm-hmm. She'd been a believer since, I think, her teenage years when she got saved, actually in Guyman, Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah.
On an Indian reservation. Missionaries led her to the Lord. But she, as an adult, she got baptized. Well, my dad really persecuted her for that. Said that she didn't go all the way under the water and called her a liar, and just it was ugly.
Yeah, but she took you guys to church.
Yeah, she took us. When my dad wouldn't let us go, we'd have church at home.
Okay.
So I grew up, learning Bible verses. My mom would Bible drill us, the old school before the phones.
Yeah.
And she always made sure that we grew up with a working knowledge of Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now tell me, so there was a point when you were a child that you decided to walk the aisle yourself. Yeah,
we had moved to Missouri. We lived in a very rural area. We actually lived 20 miles from where I went to high school. We'd ride a bus 20 miles. The town of Success, Missouri had maybe 100 people. It was very small. We had a post office and a little convenience store. But Success Baptist Church, one Sunday, I was 12, 13, 14, right in there. I walked the aisle, said the prayer, got baptized for my mom. Because it was expected of me to do this, and I did it because I love my mom. And my mom had a hard life with my dad. And so anything I could do to please my mom, I was all about.
Yeah.
And the problem with all that was I didn't get saved. And so I lived a life lost, believing in God. That was very easy for me to do. The problem was I didn't know him. Mm. I had a lot of knowledge of him, but I had no understanding at all.
Yeah. Now tell me about the relationship that you did have with your father.
Yeah, my father was very abusive physically And in other ways, with a couple of my siblings, there was 5 of us kids. I was the second oldest. I was the oldest boy. I have an older sister who's never really recovered from my father. She lives in Kansas City. My younger sister also really has struggled in her life. She actually lives here in Tulsa. My 2 younger brothers and myself, really, Tom and I are the ones that really got the physical abuse. I didn't know this. My mom told me later in life that I was the kid that when at a very young age, 4, 5 years old, would get between my dad and her. So he would come at me instead of her. Yeah, it was pretty rough. I never really experienced love from my father.
Okay.
And that was a big deal because I didn't know it at the time. But I remember we were on a camping trip one time up in the mountains in California. I was very young. I was maybe 7, 8 years old or whatever. And it's the only time I ever remember feeling safe with my dad. He got mad. He usually would get mad in the middle of the night, drag us out of bed and do what he did. And we, packed up to go home, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. And we ran into this severe thunderstorm. I mean, it was bad. And my sister and I, my older sister and I were in the back seat covered up with a blanket. And it's the only time I ever remember feeling safe with my dad.
You lived within this abusive household and you were the oldest boy.
Yeah.
And so you kind of took on the role of protector of everybody else from your dad for everybody else. Tell me a little bit about like your high school years.
Yeah, I pretty normal, I guess. I played football in high school, baseball. I mainly played baseball so I could graduate because I was not good in school. I didn't like school. When football season ended my senior year, if it wouldn't have been for baseball, probably wouldn't have graduated. But I needed to graduate because I had joined the Air Force. Okay. And back in those days, I went in the Air Force in summer of 1982. And back in those days, without a diploma, you didn't get in. Graduating was very important, very big deal to me, because it was my way out. I had the opportunity to go to college to play football out of high school, the D3 school. My coach, I'll never forget, he got really mad at me when he found out I joined the Air Force because he'd been talking to coaches at like SMS in Springfield and Central Missouri State and Warrensburg, Missouri, and he was going to get me a full ride scholarship.
Wow.
He got really upset with me, but I didn't want to go to school. And so what did they do? When I got in the Air Force, they sent me to school. A lot of on-the-job training, but that's a whole nother story.
There was something else that happened near the end of high school. You, I think it was in defiance of your father.
Yeah, I met a girl in a rival town. It was our big rivalry we had, Mountain Grove, Missouri, and I met a girl whose father was a chief of police.
Okay.
I met her at the roller skating rink one night. We used to like to go over there and pick fights and stuff, get in trouble. And it was one Friday or Saturday night, I don't remember. But anyway, I brought her back to our house, which was not easy because that was 60 miles away. It was a good distance. And I brought her back to the house, and my dad forbid me to date her. I mean, like, forbid me.
What was the reason? Because she was from the rival town?
No, I think he saw that he was going to lose control.
Oh, okay.
I think, looking back on it now, I think it was all about control.
Yeah.
It motivated me to date her. And then it even motivated me more. We got married.
Right out of high school, right?
Yeah. We got married like a week after I graduated.
Wow.
There was one day, football season was over. I was playing baseball. My dad pinned me up against the front door in the living room. And, I was a farm boy. I was a big, strong kid. I grew up in the hay fields and post woods. He pinned me up against the door and I'd had enough. And I pushed back on him. And we didn't fight, but I let him know he wasn't ever going to hit me again.
Yeah. And
he threw me out. I left the home, ended up graduating. I kept going to school, worked it all out, and graduated. But then I got married. And the day I got married to Becky, which is Megan's mom, my oldest daughter, my dad was in the parking lot of the church threatening to shoot everybody if they didn't stop the wedding, and it was really a great day.
Which probably made you want to do it
Motivated
more.
me even more.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, he was not going to tell me what to do. As a matter of fact, nobody was going to tell me what to do.
Okay.
Anymore. I'd had enough. And so what do? I go to the military where they tell you what to do.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your time in the military.
Yeah. I mean, went to boot camp, did real well. I went to tech school in Wichita Falls, Texas, was there 8 weeks. I got my first orders to Minot, North Dakota, which was a SAC base, Minot Air Force Base. I was a what they call a 431, which was a crew chief on heavy airlift aircraft, multi-engine aircraft, not fighters.
Okay.
And so I was either going to be a bomber crew chief, B-52, or a KC-135, because that's what they had up there.
Yeah.
And ended up on a tanker line. And I got there. I was supposed to go directly into school for 6 months, but we were so short-handed back then. This was in 1983.
Okay.
End of 82, 1983. Reagan had just been elected. The military was in shambles. Very, very much didn't have enough people. So they put me right on the flight line, and I did all my training on the job. 6 months later, I was an assistant crew chief and had my own plane and started traveling.
Wow. And then somewhere in there, your daughter was born.
Yeah. Megan was born in October of 83.
Okay.
We got married in 82, so I guess we were married about a year and a half when Megan came along. She was actually born at Minot Air Force Base Hospital, which was downtown. Yeah. Whenever I'd gotten to Minot, I didn't put in for orders there. I ended up there. Mm-hmm. And so as I was in processing, I put in orders to leave there. Okay. It was cold. Yeah. Up there. Very cold. Yeah. And 3 years after being there or whatever it was, I got orders to RAF Mildenhall in England. Okay. And that's when Becky and I separated. And she died several years later in a car wreck, car crash in Springfield. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit, if you're willing, about how that relationship was with your daughter when you came home.
Yeah. She had remarried before we were divorced. She had remarried a guy in the Navy and moved to Hawaii and told me that Megan was with her, which she wasn't supposed to do that. She wasn't supposed to, leave the state without my knowledge, and she did. Well, all the while, Megan was actually with her grandparents. Okay. And her grandmother kept her from me. And fast forward to years later when Rosie and I were married, and we had our family, and I was driving a truck, Tulsa to Dallas at night, and I stopped at Caney truck stop in Caney, Oklahoma, and I ran into a roadway driver that had worked with my dad that I knew, and he was from Mountain Grove. And I asked him if he'd seen Becky, and he said, well, you hadn't heard, but Becky had been killed 6 months earlier in a wreck. Wow. And I hadn't. So when I got home, I got on the phone, I called the local newspaper. I found out, yes, she had died. And then I found out they had adopted Megan behind my back. It was, I called an attorney in Hartville, Missouri, which was a county seat. Well, come to find out, he led me on. All the while, he was their attorney. They always knew where I was. They always had our phone number. I always made sure. Rosie and I were talking about the other day, in the 35 years we've been together, we've moved 7 times. Yeah. In 35 years. We've always been very stable as far as not moving. We just don't move. Yeah. And they always knew where we were. They always had my phone number. They were
But your right as a father had been taken away from you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so back to when you were in the Air Force. So really you when you came back, you didn't know where she was, and you didn't have much of a relationship with her. And then your mom, I think there's a moment with your father and you wanted to get her out of the house.
Yeah. Whenever I got out of the Air Force, I came back to Missouri, and I was in the process. I was going to move to Kansas City to try to get a job at the airport up at KCI. And because with my experience I had, I figured I would be very hireable. Somebody would hire me up there. And back in those days, nobody was hiring.
Okay.
And so I came back, and my dad he was a truck driver, so he was gone a lot. Well, he came home while I was there, and he threatened my mom. And I had a 1970 Chevy Nova that I had bought, and I'd put a motor in it, and I was piecing it together, and this was my car. And I was out working on it in the driveway, and for whatever reason, I had my .22 rifle laying on the top of my Nova, and which is not uncommon where I lived in Missouri. It was out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
You never knew what you were going to run into to shoot and eat. But anyway, my dad came out with his pistol, threatening to kill my mom. My mom came running out the front door, came over there, got behind me, and my dad confronted me on the other side of the car with his gun. And he had a wild look in his eye. Well, I put my hand on my rifle, which was pointed right at him just by how I had it laying on the car. And I told him that if he raised that gun, I was going to kill him. And he backed off. He was a classic bully. Whenever you stood up to him, he would back off. That's what he did. And that was another time he did that. And he went back in the house, and my mom finally said, Michael, you need to get me out of here. I need to leave. Yeah.
And because she was home with your little brother too, right?
Yeah. My brother Bob was there, and Tom was gone, and the girls were gone. It was just me and Bob at that moment. And my dad was leaving that day to go to Joplin to go get on the truck and go to work. And when he left, he was going to be gone a week. When he came back, she was gone, and I moved her to Kansas City.
Okay.
And got her set up there and got her going.
Yeah. And so later on, you find out that your dad had been trying to find you guys. But let's see. All right. So then, in those years, you decided to switch your profession and start trucking yourself.
Yeah, I had. When I got to Kansas City, I wasn't there very long. I realized I wasn't going to get a job at the airport. I tried everywhere up there. Nobody was hiring. None of the airlines, FBOs, nobody. I couldn't even get a job pumping gas. And so I decided I was going to move to Tulsa to go to Spartan.
Okay.
I had enough money I could pay for my first year, and I was just going to figure it out.
Yeah. Is that like school to learn how to?
Yeah, it was so I could get my A&P license,
gotcha.
so I could be a civilian mechanic, and have the credentials. And so I contacted Spartan, and I moved down here and started going to school. At the end of the year, I ran out of money. I was actually working part-time at the airport, working on UPS plane. And back in those days, it was all contracted out and everything. Anyway, ran out of money, so I got a job driving a truck. And I started making money, making really good money. And then I met Rosie.
Yeah, tell me about how you met her.
Rosie was on my route.
Okay.
And she was a stop I made every day. She worked at a printer company called Electronic Label Technology. They were like 42nd and Mingo. And they had two different buildings, and the shipping receiving was one other building. One day I backed in there, and I was in and out of there every day, running the airport freight to them. And I saw her come across the warehouse, and I was like, hey, man, who is that? And anyway, I met her. She would not even talk to me. She was nice, but and for 6 months I tried to get her to go out with me, and she wouldn't give me the time of day. I finally said, fine, whatever, and I gave up on her.
Yeah.
When I had a date with another gal, that was my insurance lady, and Rosie called me wanting to go out. that night that I already had a date. So I called the insurance lady. I said, something's come up and sorry, but and Rosie and I got together. Neither one of us were believers.
Okay.
We were both lost. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting how the Lord put us together even before we knew him. March 10th of 90, we got married.
You guys started having kiddos right away.
Yeah, she was actually pregnant with Caitlin. It was funny when Caitlin's a math major from OU, so she's very sharp in math. And I'll never forget when she was very young, when she realized that her mama was pregnant before we got married, and she confronted us with it, But we were lost.
Yeah.
It was, I call it life without Jesus. Mm-hmm. That's who we were.
You guys run into some trouble. Like you lost a trucker run and Rosie gets laid off and it causes tension. It was actually the fall of 2001. Okay. Rosie got laid off from her job, and we were the normal American family. We spent everything we made. We didn't save any money, and we made really good money between both of us. But she lost her job, was laid off. I lost my run, and so I lost half my income. I went from a road driver to city driver, which was a great big pay cut. Still good money, but a large pay cut. So fast forward to July of 2002, and we're losing our home. Yeah. It's being foreclosed on us. Well, I had to file, was it Chapter 13 bankruptcy, I think it was, or something like that. And I mean, we were a mess. Yeah. And I tell people, it's really funny because you know how everybody has a change jar, right? I didn't even have that. We were broke. And my mom got sick on top of all of that. Yeah. And had to, couldn't live by herself anymore. She had to live with someone. Well, she couldn't live with me because I love my mom, but my mom would Jesus me to death. And I just couldn't take it. Yeah. I think I was really angry at God. And because from a distance, I would watch my mom live out her faith, and I wanted that, and it was offered to me. God offered that to me 3 different times before I got saved when he spoke to me. I'll tell you about that later, but I wasn't willing to do what was necessary to get that. Yeah. Yeah, and it was, so I devised a scheme. Okay. My mom and my sister, Debbie, lived in the same apartment complex. They each had 1 bedroom. So, hey, Debbie, how about you get a 2-bedroom and we move you in together? You can be mom's roommate. And she loved it. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty smart, huh? So one Saturday morning, my brother Tom, who lived at that time, I think he was in New York, maybe he was in Missouri. I don't recall where he was at, probably New York or out on the East Coast. He happened to be in Tulsa, and he was going to help me move, but he had a flight to catch or something. He had to leave early. Yeah. So he wasn't going to be there long. So Saturday morning we get over there, Debbie hasn't packed anything. My mom's place there's still stuff on the walls. I'm thinking this is going to be a long day. And, Jonathan was with me. He was my sidekick. He was stuck to me like glue. He was probably 10 at the time. And, all of a sudden 10 guys from Evergreen showed up with 5 pickups. And it was, it happened to be a Saturday morning. Once a month, they had a prayer breakfast at Ziggy's on Saturday. And it happened to be that Saturday. And your mom, she was an Evergreen member.
Yeah, she was an Evergreen member. Okay. And I want to say back in those days, they were probably meeting at that hotel. Okay. At that time. Yeah. And so these guys showed up and really saved my bacon. I mean, they just jumped in there and we got it done. Yeah. Well, one of those guys named Ray Santiago, who doesn't go to Evergreen anymore, he's a federal postal inspector, and he had moved to Edmond, and he's still over there today. I love that guy. He came up to me and in Ray's way and says, so Where do you go to church? And I go, so I appreciate your help. Mind your own business. I don't go to church. Don't want to go to church. Appreciate your help. Walk away.
Yeah.
And that was my answer.
Yeah.
And he took a step closer to me and got in my face and said, hello, don't you see you have an impressionable young man here who's at an age you need to get this boy in church? And he was right. And I knew that. And as a matter of fact, Rosie had gotten saved 3 years prior to me. Mm. And I was encouraging her to go to church, mainly, I think, because I didn't want to be my dad.
Yeah.
Right? Because my dad wouldn't let my mom take us to church, very intermittently. Anyway, so...
But he kind of threatened you, like he stepped into your space. Yeah,
he got right in my face, and I felt threatened, and I was, I didn't play that.
Yeah.
You want to go? Let's go. Yeah. And he infuriated me, and I went around the corner, but I was in a pickle because they had just given up their Saturday to help me move my mom. I can't beat this guy up. And so I go around the corner, I'm smoking a cigarette, and I can't repeat what I was thinking.
Yeah. Blowing off steam.
And it just wore on me. And so I came around, and my brother, Tom, will tell you today, he said, man, I thought you were going to kill him. Anyway, I went and found Ray, and I said, all right, man, because I was really big on, I didn't want to owe you anything.
Sure.
And I felt like I owed these guys. So I went up to Ray and I said, all right, man, I'm gonna load them up, and I'm gonna come to church tomorrow to repay you for helping me today. Mm. Like, I'm doing him some big favor by going to church. Yeah. And he goes, no, you won't. And he got in my face again. And I go, well, I told you I'll be there. He goes, man, don't do me that way. Don't lie to me. I'm going to be standing out front tomorrow waiting on you to show up, and then you're not going to show up. Don't do me like that. Well, what he didn't tell me was he was on a greeting team. He would have been out there anyway, But he challenged me. He got in my face and he challenged me. And later on, it was a good thing I didn't hit him because he had a gun because he's a federal agent.
No.
Yeah, he would have shot me. But and he wouldn't miss.
Yeah.
But anyway, went to church the next day, and he shuffled us off to Joe Fear's Sunday school class. Joe was teaching out of Psalms. And he said, turn your Bible to Psalm 51. And what you have to understand is, I grew up in church. I've been reading the Bible all my life. I've heard the Bible read all my life. I knew John 3:16. I know the Roman road. I know these things, right? I had all this knowledge, but I never understood it. Yeah. The Bible to me was like, the only thing I can compare it to is like reading French. It meant nothing to me, so I didn't do it. I avoided it like the plague because every time I tried to read the Bible, I just didn't understand. Maybe it intimidated me, or it just ticked me off. But how do you all understand this stuff? I don't get it. Yeah. This day, though, I read Psalm 52. Joe said Psalm 51 verse something. I heard 52. Why do you boast of evil, you mighty man? Why do you boast all day long? You who are a disgrace in the eyes of God, you practice deceit. Your tongue plots destruction. It's like a sharpened razor. You love evil rather than good, falsehood rather than speaking the truth. You love every harmful word, O you deceitful tongue. Surely God will bring you down to everlasting ruin. He will snatch you up pluck you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. It's the first time I ever read the Bible that I understood it. Yeah. I got that. God was relaying a message to me that I was not a good guy. Mm. And the sharpened tongue, the CB radio, I was a monster on the radio. All those years trucking Dallas. And I had a reputation. And it wasn't a good one. And I got that. Well, I hear all of a sudden, then I go to church, and I hear Pastor Michael, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. what was happening was God started calling me.
Mm.
We come back to church. It's like, hey, Rosie, let's go to church on Wednesday night. We'll go to church Wednesday night. And I'll never forget this, and Rosie remembers too, but they broke us off into groups to pray, like little small groups.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't very many people. There may be 50 people or whatever, or less than that, I'm probably. But it was Rosie and I, Phil and Colette Shenneworth, that were in a group. And Phil prayed, Colette prayed, and it was my turn to pray. And I was like, squeezing Rosie's hand, pass, how do you pray? I don't know. I can't.
Yeah.
Well, and then Rosie's the same way. I mean, we've never prayed. We don't know how to pray. How do you pray? And so they caught on, and then they closed out, and it was an interesting thing. But we came back to church Sunday. And this went on for a month. Wednesday night, Sunday night. I mean, the church was open. We were going. Mm-hmm. And I was learning. I was actually understanding the Bible. I was starting to hear it and understand it. And then Wednesday before 101 on August 4th, I was under so much conviction, I just couldn't go. I couldn't go to church that Wednesday night. So I went to the bar, and I had my cell phone. And I was waiting on Rosie to call because I needed to fight. Yeah. It was time to fight. And she got to church, to Thoreau. She called me. Hey, where you at? I'm up here at church. And I'm like, where you at? And I was like, well, I'm at C.J. Mahoney's. Why don't you come up here and eat dinner with me? You're at a bar? We've been going to church and doing so good, and you're at a bar? Click. Yeah. She got mad. Mission accomplished. But I'll never forget that, because I was sitting at that bar, and it's like I had an out-of-body experience, is the only way I can describe it. It was like God took me, and I was hovering over this bar, and I could see everybody in there, and it was dark. And God spoke to me. This was actually the second time he spoke to me. I didn't tell you about the first time yet, but the second time he goes, this is not what I have for you. And that's all he said. Mm. And then I left, and I went home. Went back to church Sunday. And back then, Evergreen 101 was during church service. It was 1 hour. It was, I guess, consolidated version. And we went to Sunday school. Mm-hmm. And when I was out in the parking lot smoking a cigarette, and it hit me again, I just had to leave. I've been thinking a lot, and I've been asking the Lord to show me how to describe the conviction that I was under. And it was like the mystical alien sin versus Jesus having this tug of war match inside of me. Mm-hmm. It was this tug of war going on. It was like sin was calling me and tugging me towards what I could see, right? And Jesus was tugging me towards something I couldn't see, that I had to choose by faith. Yeah. And it was this great struggle that it was just ripping me out. It was just tearing my insides out. I just couldn't be there anymore. And I was going to leave and come back and pick up Rosie and the kids after church. And God spoke to me for the third time. He told me straight up, if you even start this car, I'm done with you. And I believed in God. I know he's real. I just heard him for the third time. Still haven't told you about the first time yet. But I ran back in there. Yeah. Now, it's August 4th. I just got done smoking a Marlboro. I'm sure I smell really good. And I run into this teaching lounge where there's probably 10 or 12 people or whatever. And my inside, that tug of war that was going on was just like exploding. Yeah. I don't even have the words to describe. I was screaming hysterically inside of me to end this class so I can talk to this guy. Yeah. I had to talk to this pastor alone. So the class ended. Rosie's all excited because we're joining a church. She'd been a believer 3 years or so, and she looks at me. She goes, "Are you going to fill out the covenant? Are you going to fill it out?" She's all excited, I'm I'm like, look, you need to go get my mom, get the kids, and wait on me. I got to talk to this dude.
Mm-hmm.
So I waited. Everybody left. I shut the door, and I'm sure I had a crazy look in my eye. And I was like, all right, preacher, man of God, been to seminary. You know all these things. How do you know you're saved? Mm. I've said the prayer 1,000 times. I believe in God. How do you know? If I pull a gun out and shoot you dead right now, how do you know you're going to heaven? Mm. Tell me. And he sat me down. He didn't tell me anything I hadn't heard 1,000 times except Romans 10:9 and 10. See, I had never confessed with my mouth. I had never given my heart to Jesus until that day. It was like, I'm sitting here looking at this backpack, and it was like I had this backpack of stuff. And my backpack, my burden was so heavy. It had gotten so heavy, I couldn't even carry it anymore. I couldn't even get it on my back. And if I did, I couldn't get up. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it's gone. The thing that really struck me, there's two things about that day that I remember. When I came out of there, after I received Christ, I was finally there. I was saved. My mom was sitting there when I came out. And I go, Mom, I just gave my heart to Jesus, got saved. She goes, Michael, you were saved when you were 13. No, Mom, I wasn't. What a tragedy it is of how many folks today are in our churches who grew up in church like me, who have all the knowledge, who believe in Jesus. They just don't know him. Mm-hmm. They've never confessed him. They've never made that transaction of faith.
Yeah.
What a tragedy.
Yeah.
And I was one of those. That night at my house, sitting on my back porch, that was my smoke hole. I was smoking a cigarette. And God came to me. And he picked me up. He held me in his lap and loved me. I never had that before. I never had my father hug me, love on me, and it was real. And he's been doing it every day ever since.
When we met the first time to talk about your story, something that I loved that you said was you realized later on when it was that you actually received salvation. Yeah. It wasn't after Mike Hoyt explained Romans 10 to you.
Yeah, it was just a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe God figured it was time to fill me in on this detail. Mm-hmm. But that moment in the parking lot when he came to me and he spoke to me and he told me this is my last chance, that was a moment of salvation for me, because at that moment, and he showed me this, and I kind of thought this, and I went to him before about it, but he was always quiet about it. He would never show me anything on it. And when I turned and went in the building, that's when I decided Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's when I got saved. But it's really interesting because immediately after I got saved, God started pouring into me. Mm-hmm. I would open the Bible and it was like I was in a waterfall. It was the most incredible thing I've ever experienced, and it still is.
I love that about your story, that the Lord, he would do things like that for you. He would make it real.
Yeah.
And living and speak to you, if not audibly, inside of your heart, and you would recognize that. I want to give you a chance to tell us about the first time that he spoke to you.
Yeah, the first time God spoke to me, I was trucking south to Dallas one night. I was, and I still am, the biggest Kansas City Chiefs fan that ever walked the face of this planet. I'm a huge Chiefs fan, mm-hmm. and it was a Monday night. If the Chiefs win, They've had a great season. If they win, they're going to the playoffs. If they lose, they're not going to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Monday night game against the Raiders, I believe it was, and they lost. Mm. And I was devastated, heartbroken to the max, because that was one of my gods, was the Chiefs. That's a pretty sorry God, but that's what it was.
Yeah.
And God spoke to me that night in that spot. He said, I will never let you down. And I knew it was him. I mean, there was no misinterpretation of, that's the first time he spoke to me. I will never let you down. And that is true.
I love that each time that he spoke to you, it was redeeming that relationship that you didn't have with your earthly father. And he was coming in as your heavenly father to know, hey, I will never let you down. That's the first thing he said to you.
Yeah.
So now you're a new Christian and you're part of Evergreen. The church is growing, and you start feeling a pull to be discipled, or I think you might be confronted by somebody.
Yeah. We had moved from Joe Fears, and Amy Hawley had a Sunday school class. And I don't know the timeline. It hadn't been long after I got saved. I mean, probably within a month or so. And we were at Amy Hawley's class, and of course it was a school, so we were big round tables. And Don Hushback and his wife Barbara were sitting there with Rosie and I, and we never spoke a word to each other. And all week long, he just was on me. You need to go to that guy. I didn't even know his name. And you need to tell him that I want you with him. So that next Sunday at church, Dawn was there, Barbara was there, and I went up to Dawn after class and I go, hey man, I don't want you to think I'm crazy here, but this is all new to me. But I think God wants me to get with you about something. He goes, yeah, I know. And he goes, Don, he goes, but I'm not going to spoon feed you. I'll teach you the faith, but I'm not going to spoon feed you. Meaning, see, Don is perfect for me because I need it the way he gives it. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He's very direct with me. Over the years when he's had to get on me, it's been in love, but he knows how to get on me. Yeah. He knows how to love me, but God sent the exact right guy that I needed. He started giving me homework. Well, one thing he taught me was he would never give me the answer. He would give me direction. Like the big thing with Don was word searches. He'd have me the very first thing I did was a word search on pride and humble and contrite. He gave me a concordance and a King James Version Bible. He said, and he showed me how to use it. He said, now you go do it.
Yeah.
And I did. And we'd meet, and then he'd say, well, what'd you learn? And then he'd give me another word and another word and another word. And it just grew. And then he'd rewrite the 23rd Psalm, or he'd have me read on Judges 11 and Jephthah about covenant, or he just taught me. He still is. I still covet our time together. Our time together now is shorter, but every time I meet with him, I learn from him. And every time I sit with Emilio at prayer breakfast, I always try to go early because I've learned so much from him.
I love that. And you said that you also had served in Awana, and that helped you to learn verses.
Yeah. Awana, for me, as a young believer, not knowing anything about the Bible was huge. I was an Awana leader for, I don't know, probably 4 years. I got to where I started memorizing these verses with these boys. I was over 6th grade boys, and I had several of them, and it was. I tell you what I miss about my mom the most. I'll never forget. I was at Awana one night, and a leader came up to me. This other guy, I don't remember his name. They don't go to Evergreen anymore. I hadn't seen him in years, but he goes, "Hey man, where's the 10 Commandments at in the Bible?" And I'm like, "You're asking me? I have no idea."
Yeah.
"Hey mom," I called my mom on the phone. Where's the 10 Commandments at? "Oh, it's Exodus 20, Michael." Yeah. Duh, And I go, hey, man, it's an Exodus 20. You know, my mom was my go-to in emergency situations.
Yeah.
But yeah, Awana was I can't stress to you enough, if you're really struggling, if you're young in your faith, or even older in your faith, and you want to be refreshed, get around these kids. You know, one of my granddaughters, well, actually several of my granddaughters, I love, anytime we go out to eat or they're over, I always ask them hey, who wants to say grace? And they fight over it. And I love it because they're all in. Their faith is just, it's extraordinary. Their faith. I love watching them pray. I love hearing them pray. It's so easy for them.
Yeah. Would you mind telling us about how the last few years in the relationship with your dad went?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things the Lord has shown me over the years is our faith walk is like climbing stairs, right? And it's one step to the next. Most of them aren't easy. You know, climbing stairs typically is not easy. And it came to a point one day the Lord wanted me to teach me about forgiveness. And he came to me one day and said, Mike, I want you to go to your dad and seek his forgiveness for all you've done to him. Wow. And I was like, all I've done to him? Say what? I was like, Lord, what do you mean I haven't done anything to him? And God got quiet. I mean, I had my orders, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. Nope, not going to do it. Well, I was at a point in my spiritual walk where my growth stopped. God was still communing with me. He was there, but I wasn't going, the next step wasn't coming. And this went on for several months. And finally, the Lord came to me again and said, so, you ready yet? You know? And I gave in. I said, okay, Lord, I'll do it. And I called my dad. He lived in Tulsa at the time. And our relationship was mud, not good. And him being in Tulsa, I think, was his way of trying to get right with me in some weird way. And so I called him and said, hey, I want to come see you. There's something I want to talk to you about. And he goes, yeah, come on. You know, so I went over there and he was pretty much not bedridden, but he didn't get out of his chair much. You know, I did all of his shopping for him and stuff. Anyway, I went into him and I asked him forgiveness for all I'd done to him. And we talked about all that and come to find out he was upset with me. But it really didn't do him any good. It was for me. It healed me, and it caused me to be able to serve him in the last couple of years of his life in taking care of him. Yeah. And so I went with my dad from one extreme. My dad was a tyrant. He was very violent. He was not nice. Honestly, don't know how anybody could act that way in the things he did, especially to your children. I mean, I'll never understand that. To go to forgiveness and seeking his forgiveness and then able to honor him through serving him through the latter days of his life, to the point where I was there when he died and I prayed with him when he was dying. The prayer of salvation, hoping, my dad is lost. Yeah. Forever. Yeah. It's tragic. It's a tragic story.
Yeah. But what I do love about that is that, you know, God changed your heart and that you were honoring to your father. Even though his heart was hardened to the gospel, The Lord was changing you, and He was
Yeah.
working on you. So as we come to a close, if there's somebody in our church who is hearing your story today, or even somebody who is across the country and they've stumbled upon this episode, and maybe they've had a hard life themselves, and they know about God, they know Jesus, but they don't have that relationship, and they are stuck in a life of living paycheck to paycheck, and rough marriage, and just there's something missing. What is it that you would want to say to this person?
Don't let somebody or something keep you from God. One thing we all have in common, all of us, we're all, at the end of today, we are all one day closer to the end of our lives. Mm-hmm. None of us are going to, are not going to die. We're all going to come to the end unless Jesus comes back first. Mm-hmm. At the end, that person or that thing or whatever it is, whatever your hang up is that keeps you from God, is not going to be standing there when you stand in front of God. It's not going to be you and that person and God. It's not going to be you and your wife or you and your husband or you and your mom and dad or you and your best friend or you and me or whoever. It's going to be you and it's going to be God. And God's going to ask you a question. Why should I allow you into my kingdom? Well, with confidence, because Jesus has proven himself to me. He's never going to let me down. He's going to step in. This one belongs to me, and I belong to him. So don't let anything keep you from God.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to today's episode. If you have any questions or want to hear about our church, please visit our website at evergreenbc.org. That is evergreenbc.org.